I was gutted by 6 words in a clinic room. The doctor said her next meal could kill her. My daughter grabbed my hand while he circled December 20th in red ink. But when he mocked my chance of change, the scale later proved him wrong. 30 pounds gone, 10 seconds standing tall. And that was only the beginning. Dr. Patel's office smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee, the kind that had been sitting on the burner since morning. Outside the wide window, late autumn light slanted across Maple Grove, Ohio, where leaves skittered down the sidewalk in small flurries. The doctor adjusted his glasses and fixed his gaze on the man across the desk. Her next meal could kill her, he said evenly, his voice carrying the gravity of a verdict. Then he leaned forward. And for you, Tom, one more wrong plate might mean Christmas in the hospital. Emily's hand tightened around her father's. At 32, she had grown used to holding a pen more than another person's fingers, but now she clutched him like she had when she was a child. She could almost hear the porch swing creaking in her memory, the one behind his small house wooden slats that had carried him through long evenings and heavier thoughts. She knew he would retreat there again after this appointment. Tom Walker, 58, shifted in his chair. He was a man who had once swung hammers and climbed ladders for a living, shoulders broad enough to carry beams, but now under the fluorescent light his shirt stretched tight around his middle. He raised his chin, trying to look indifferent. Dr. Patel did not flinch. 45 pounds, he said. That's what has to come off. 90 days, by December 20th. Otherwise, I have no choice but to move you onto the transplant prep list. Emily's pen scratched furiously on the small notepad she carried everywhere. 90 days, Dad. 45 pounds. That's half a pound a day. He's serious. The doctor continued, voice steady. If you fail, Tom will be forced to schedule for kidney transplant evaluation. And with your blood pressure, that path is uncertain. He paused, letting the words land like stones. You must change now. There is no cushion left. The silence that followed seemed to absorb the tick of the wall clock. Tom pressed his lips together. His mind searched for something lighter, something to cut through the heaviness. Finally, he let out a short laugh, more air than sound. Well, he said a slice of apple pie never killed anybody. Emily's head jerked toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. Dad, this isn't funny. She turned back to the doctor, almost pleading. Tell him. Patel folded his hands. I am telling him. Denial is dangerous, Mr. Walker. A single plate, the wrong plate, could be what tips you over the edge. Tom looked down at his shoes, scuffed from years of half-finished yard work. He thought of the porch swing waiting for him at home, the one place he could disappear without anyone watching. The ultimatum rattled around inside him like a loose coin in a jar. 45 pounds, 90 days. A deadline that carried more weight than anything he had lifted on a construction site. He stood slowly, thanked the doctor with a nod that sounded polite but hollow, and led Emily out into the fading light. The clinic door closed behind them with a soft click. The town carried on as if nothing had changed. Mailboxes lined up along the street, a postman waving the faint chime of the Methodist Church on Main. As they reached the corner, the warm scent of butter and cinnamon drifted from the diner across the street. Tom inhaled instinctively. The glow from the neon open sign flickered against the window where pies cooled on a rack. Emily tugged at his sleeve. Please, Dad. Don't. but he managed another crooked grin. It's a cold day. Pie's as good a way as any to warm up. He pushed the door open, a bell jangling overhead. Inside, the air wrapped around him like an old coat. Coffee brewing, bacon grease lingering in the corners, chatter of farmers finishing their late lunches. A waitress in a red apron passed with a tray, offering a smile. Cold day, huh? Stay warm now. Tom slid into a booth by the window, the seat sticking slightly beneath him. He picked up the menu out of habit, though he already knew what he wanted. His eyes skimmed the list, meatloaf, fried chicken, pancakes at all hours, before settling on the pie section. He tapped the laminated page with his finger, a man pretending to have choices when the decision was already made. The waitress returned pad ready. What can I get you, Han? Coffee and a slice of apple pie. He spoke the words with a quiet satisfaction, as though daring Dr. Patel's warning to chase him in here. Emily didn't sit. She lingered by the booth, torn between anger and worry. You just heard him. 45 pounds, Dad. 90 days. Tom poured cream into his coffee, watching the swirl bloom and fade. A slice never killed anyone. He repeated softly, though this time even he heard the thinness in his voice. The porch swing waited at home, creaking in the twilight. The deadline hovered like an invisible weight. And as the waitress set down the plate, golden crust, glistening steam curling upward, Tom wrapped his hand around the fork as if the next bite could both defy and define him. The plastic fork snapped clean in two, the brittle handle skittering across the kitchen table. Tom stared at the fractured piece and the untouched pile of raw kale and carrots before him. To hell with this rabbit food, he muttered, tossing the broken fork aside. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the empty kitchen. Emily had left early that morning for work, insisting she'd stock the fridge with fresh options, bags of spinach, cucumbers, low-fat dressing. She'd left a note taped to the refrigerator door, salad for lunch. Call me if you need help prepping. He had read it twice, then opened a beer instead. Now facing the pile of greens again at dinner, frustration boiled over. He pulled open the fridge and scanned for something better. Cold cuts, leftover mashed potatoes, a slice of meatloaf he had promised not to touch. His stomach growled. For a moment, he imagined Dr. Patel sitting at the table across from him, repeating the same cold numbers, 45 pounds, 90 days. Tom slammed the fridge door shut. By late afternoon, he was sitting in his truck outside Maggie's diner, engine idling. Through the fogged windows, he saw familiar faces lined up along the counter, mugs of coffee steaming. A couple of neighbors nodded in his direction through the glass. He thought he heard one of them chuckle, the words carried on memory, if not air, old Tom's here every day. He turned the key and killed the engine. Shame prickled his skin. He couldn't go inside again. Not today. He shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and walked back toward his house, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. On the porch steps, he found Pete Carson, an old co-worker from the construction site, leaning against the railing with a six-pack dangling from one hand. Evening, Tommy boy. Pete grinned, raising the beer. Figured you could use some company. Cards a game, a couple cold ones. The faint crackle of a baseball broadcast drifted from a neighbor's radio. The crowd roared through static, as if tempting him to join the noise and forget the warnings. Tom's throat tightened. His body ached for the familiar comfort of beer-fried wings, the camaraderie of men who didn't ask hard questions. Not tonight, Pete, he said, forcing a smile. Doctor's orders. Pete raised an eyebrow. Doctor doesn't have to know. He set the six-pack down on the step. The metallic clink of bottles made Tom's mouth water. He shook his head, voice rough. I can't. Thanks, though. Pete shrugged disappointed and wandered off into the dusky street. The porch light clicked on as the sky darkened, bathing the swing in a tired glow. Tom lowered himself onto the slats, the wood creaking familiarly beneath his weight. He pulled a worn photograph from his shirt pocket, a picture of his late wife taken on this very porch 15 years earlier. Her smile was warm, unhurried, the kind that had steadied him through layoffs and surgeries. He ran a thumb over the photo's fading edges. You'd know what to do, he whispered. The swing rocked gently as a cold breeze pushed against it. The smell of damp leaves rose from the yard. Emily's voice echoed in his head, brittle with frustration. 90 days. Dad, half a pound a day. Dr. Patel's warning thudded behind it. The porch light flickered, then steadied again. Tom leaned back, chest heavy, and let the swing carry him. Maybe it's easier, he murmured into the night, to just let it end. Let fate do what it wants. His words slipped away like smoke caught by the autumn wind. For the first time, he let himself picture a hospital bed at Christmas, the smell of antiseptic instead of pine silence, instead of carols. And part of him felt almost relieved at the thought of no longer fighting. A car pulled into the drive, headlights sweeping across the yard. Tom squinted as the beams cut across the porch. The swing creaked to a stop. Out stepped Pastor John carrying a paper bag that smelled faintly of toasted bread. Evening Tom, the pastor, called gently, his breath visible in the cool air. He climbed the steps, lifting the bag with a small smile. We had potluck at the church. Thought you might want some of the leftovers. Nothing fancy, just bread, a little jam. Tom stared at him, words caught in his throat. The porch light hummed above them, chasing the darkness back for a moment. The church hall still carried the hum of conversation, though the potluck had ended an hour ago. Folding chairs scraped against the wooden floor as parishioners stacked them into neat rows. The smell of weak coffee clung to the air, a scent that reminded Tom of late nights on job sites and early mornings when he was too tired to taste it. He sat at one of the long tables, hands folded, staring at the crumbs of cornbread left on his plate. Pastor John approached quietly, his step slow but certain, and rested a hand on Tom's shoulder. Even prodigals come home, Tom, he said, voice low, carrying a calm conviction. But they have to take the first step. Tom lifted his eyes. What if the first step feels like the hardest? The pastor settled into the chair beside him. My son, you know about him. He wandered far too far for years, and still he turned back. Not because the path was easy, but because the alternative was unbearable. You have value, Tom, more than you know. Tom's chest tightened. For a moment, he let himself believe the words allowed sympathy to ease the ache. But it didn't last. When he left the church, the cold air outside reminded him that sympathy wouldn't pay bills or shave pounds. Later that evening, he found himself in his younger brother's living room. The coffee table was covered in envelopes, half-opened bills stacked into two piles. The TV murmured from the corner, the glow reflecting off the half-empty glass in his brother's hand. I just need a little help to get through this, Tom began. His voice sounded foreign, as if asking was already an admission of weakness. A few weeks, maybe. Cover groceries, meds. I'll make it back to you. His brother leaned back, shaking his head. Tom, I've carried enough weight in this family. I'm not here to bankroll your poor choices. The words landed like a slap. Tom clenched his fists on his knees. Poor choices. I'm trying. Doctors got me on some strict plan. You've been trying your whole life. And where's it got you? I've got kids to feed. I'm not adding another grown man to the list. His brother pushed the stack of bills toward the center of the table with finality. I won't fund a burden. The word echoed in Tom's skull, burden. He stood slowly, his face hot shame mixing with anger. Right, he said, voice brittle. Wouldn't want to waste your precious dollars. He left before his brother could respond, the screen door slamming behind him, its metallic rattle ringing in his ears all the way down the steps. The next morning at Dr. Patel's clinic, the fluorescent lights felt harsher than usual. Emily sat stiffly beside him, notebook in her lap. Patel entered with a file expression firm. Tom, he began, without pleasantries, you've lost some weight, but not enough. We're down to 60 days, 30 pounds to go. He set the chart on the counter, the numbers circled in red. This is not optional. If you fail, you'll move on to the transplant evaluation list. That means hospital stays waiting and odds that are not in your favor. The room tilted slightly. Tom gripped the arm of the chair. 60 days, he whispered. 30 pounds. The figures felt like stones stacking on his chest. Patel nodded. You can still do this. But the clock is running, Tom. Every meal, every plate matters. No more jokes. No more pie. Emily reached for his hand, but he pulled it back, eyes locked on the red circle on the chart. The hum of the clinic lights grew louder like a timer, counting down. By the time dusk fell, he sat again on his porch swing, the wooden slats pressing into his back. The porch light flickered on, throwing a weary glow across the yard. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the ground. The word burden replayed louder than the doctor's ultimatum, heavier than the pastor's encouragement. A shadow stretched across the steps. Tom looked up to see Maggie, the diner waitress, walking slowly toward him, a cardboard box in her hands. Her apron was folded neatly under her coat. She held out the box, the smell of roasted chicken and vegetables escaping into the cool night. Consider this on the house, Tom, she said softly. Everyone deserves one good meal. He stared at the box, unable to speak. The porch light hummed above them. The swing creaked beneath him, and somewhere deep inside, the clock continued to tick. The porch light was still glowing against the gray dawn when Tom stepped outside, shoulders hunched against the cold. Frost clung to the lawn like a thin veil, and his breath rose in clouds. On the top step sat a cardboard box. Balanced on its lid was an index card the color of faded grass, its corner stained with a spot of grease. The handwriting was firm, practical. Start here, Tom. He bent slowly, knees stiff, and lifted the box into his arms. The swing creaked behind him, a reminder of the nights he had spent sinking into despair, whispering about giving up. He carried the box inside and set it on the table. Emily hovered nearby, arms folded. Inside were simple portions, grilled chicken breast, wrapped neatly in foil, a container of green beans, a second of roasted carrots, and one shining apple. The card explained MRE style plate 1 protein, 2 veggie, 1 fruit. M. Emily leaned over his shoulder. She made this for you, Tom shrugged, pretending nonchalance, though something stirred in his chest. Looks that way. Dad, it's balanced. just like Patel wanted. He held the card between two fingers, studying the straightforward ratios. No calorie charts, no complicated recipes. Just order the kind of system he might have understood better years ago on construction sites where blueprints dictated survival. For the first time in weeks, a small spark of hope slipped through the cracks of his doubt. That evening, the church hall glowed warm against the November dark. Folding tables sagged with casseroles and pies left over from a youth fundraiser Tom had promised Emily he'd stop by just for fellowship, nothing more. But as the hymns faded and small talk stretched on, his hand reached for second helpings, then thirds. Macaroni heavy with cheese, a wedge of pumpkin pie, a ladle of gravy over rolls. The laughter of neighbors filled the room, wooden chairs, scraping children chasing each other between tables. Tom laughed along until suddenly the room tilted. He caught himself against the wall, breath-shallow sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. A parishioner asked if he was all right, but he waved them off, shame flooding hotter than the dizziness. Back home, the porch swing beckoned the usual refuge for regret. But tonight, someone was waiting. Maggie stood at the edge of the light, her coat buttoned scarf tucked tight. She had the same calm expression she wore behind the diner counter, but her eyes were steady, almost stern. "This isn't about shame," she said quietly, as if she'd been rehearsing. "It's about tomorrow. Start again now." Tom swallowed throat raw. "I messed it up. Again." "You're still breathing," she replied. "That means you get another chance." He looked down at his hands trembling slightly, still smelling of gravy and sugar. For a moment he thought of throwing everything away, card meals, effort. But then he saw Emily's face in his mind, the way she scribbled Patel's deadlines like lifelines. He pushed himself up from the swing legs, unsteady but determined. Inside the kitchen, Maggie followed silently as he scraped the leftover pie and rolls into the trash. The sound of food hitting the bin felt like a ritual, equal parts loss and cleansing. He unwrapped the foiled chicken from her box, placed it on a plate with the beans and carrots, and set the apple beside them. No ceremony, no feast, just what the card had instructed. He sat at the table lit only by the hum of the porch light through the window and ate each bite slowly, as if relearning how to nourish himself. Emily appeared in the doorway, her surprise softening into something like relief. Tom finished, wiped his mouth, and slid the empty plate forward. For the first time in months, he did not feel stuffed or guilty or resigned. He felt ready. Maggie stepped closer, pulling something from her coat pocket. A worn leather wallet unfolded, and from it she drew a laminated card, edges frayed. She placed it on the table, sliding it toward him with two fingers. The emblem was unmistakable. A U.S. Army identification, the photo faded, but her name still legible. "I'll tell you tomorrow," she said, a thin smile crossing her face. "Why that green card works." The porch light hummed overhead, steady against the November dark, as Tom stared at the ID, wondering who exactly had placed the box on his step and what else she carried behind that calm voice. Maggie held the green index card between her fingers, the early light spilling through Tom's kitchen window. She turned it over with care, as though she had done this gesture 100 times before. On the back, a line of faded ink announced its past: Fort Hood, 9196 Army Nutrition Unit. Her voice was steady, but quiet. "This is how we kept boys alive, Tom. Ratio's discipline starting again. every dawn. Tom's breath caught. The card, simple and grease-stained, carried more weight than he'd imagined. It wasn't just advice. It was survival, condensed into numbers and balance. He nodded once, slipping it into the corner of the fridge door. Then that's where it stays. By mid-morning, he and Emily were back in Dr. Patel's clinic. The hallway smelled of sanitizer and brewed coffee, the kind poured into styrofoam cups that cooled before you finished them. Emily clutched her notepad, though her hands shook too much to write. Inside the exam room, the scale waited like a silent judge. Tom stepped onto it, shoes off, heart pounding in his throat. The red digits blinked, paused, then settled. Emily gasped. Patel adjusted his glasses, leaned forward, then looked directly at Tom. "You've done it. The numbers meet the target." Tom exhaled, almost laughing at the sound, but Patel raised a hand. "One more thing." He motioned toward the open space beside the exam table. "Stand. 10 seconds. No support." The room went silent, except for the faint tick of the wall clock. Tom rose, legs stiff, palms damp. He lifted his chin, focusing on a point on the opposite wall. 1 second. 2. The floor seemed to shift, but he steadied. Emily's breath held sharp in her chest. 5 seconds. His knees trembled. A bead of sweat traced down his temple. 8 seconds. His body begged to reach for the counter for anything solid. 10 seconds. He was still upright, still steady, still standing. Emily lunged forward, wrapping her arms around him, tears streaking freely now. "You did it, Dad. You really did it." Her words cracked, but carried the relief of weeks of fear unraveling in a single embrace. Patel scribbled something into the chart, then closed the folder with a deliberate snap. "Off the transplant prep list," he said, extending his hand. "You bought time, Tom, with discipline." Tom clasped the doctor's hand, the grip firm, the moment anchoring itself in his memory like the feel of oak beneath his palms. At noon, they walked into Maggie's diner. The smell of coffee and grilled chicken drifted through the air, but today, the pie sat untouched on the counter. Tom slid into his usual booth, the sunlight pooling across the table. Maggie approached with 2 mugs, refilling coffee without asking. She placed a plate before him. Roast chicken, green beans, a slice of apple. Simple, measured. "This one's on the house," she said. Tom shook his head, pulling a couple of crumpled bills from his wallet. He set them under the mug. "Not today. Today, I tip." $2 lay neatly beneath the cup. Maggie's lips tugged into the faintest smile. She tapped the card he'd pulled from his pocket, now already smudged from use. "Keep it on the fridge. Don't let a celebration undo the road you walked." He nodded, chewing slowly, deliberately, each bite a victory stitched into the routine. Emily across the table wiped at her eyes again, but this time with a grin breaking through. By late afternoon, the porch light clicked on early against the fading sky. The swing waited, but tonight it didn't carry despair. It carried the weight of relief. On the fridge door inside, the green card now rested beneath a magnet shaped like a church bell. It was no longer a loaned token. It was a fixture, a map forward. The phone rang, startling the quiet. Tom lifted the receiver. Pastor John's voice crackled through, warm and firm. "Tom, Thanksgiving, potluck, needs a main dish and a story of hope. Will you come?" Tom looked at the porch lights spilling across the yard, then at Emily, smiling faintly in the kitchen doorway. He pressed the receiver close of the card glowing in the corner of his eye. Steam rose from a pair of coffee mugs lined on the diner's wide front window, blurring the view of the street beyond. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season dusted the sidewalks of Maple Grove. Somewhere down the block, a church bell chimed its notes, carrying through the crisp holiday air. Inside, the diner hummed with warmth, forks tapping, laughter rising, and the smell of roasted turkey mingling with fresh pie. Tom entered with Emily at his side, balancing a tray covered in foil. His gait was slower than years past, but there was steadiness in his step that had not been there at the start of autumn. Maggie caught his eye from behind the counter, her usual calm nod greeting him. The corner of her mouth lifted just enough to say she noticed the tray and what it represented. At the church hall later that noon, the potluck tables stretched end to end, brimming with dishes that spoke of family pride, stuffing glistening with butter cranberry sauce, catching the light, pies lined like soldiers waiting their turn. Tom set his tray in the center. When the foil was pulled back, the crowd saw roast chicken, bright green beans, roasted carrots, and bowls of sliced apples, each portion arranged like a painter's careful strokes. A couple of older parishioners leaned close, intrigued. "That's different," Tom once said. "Looks balanced." "Where'd you learn that trick?" Tom lifted the familiar green index card from his jacket pocket and placed it beside the tray. The handwriting still clear despite the smudges. 1 protein, 2 veggie, 1 fruit. He smiled. It isn't about going hungry. It's about choosing right at the right time. 1 plate at a time. Pastor John approached his hand, finding Tom's shoulder just as it had weeks ago. This time his touch was not coaxing, but affirming. "Friends," the pastor said to the gathered crowd, "our brother Tom has a word worth hearing today." Tom hesitated, then cleared his throat. "I was told once my next meal could kill me. I believed it. But what I've learned is that the next meal can save you if you choose it to. Not by starving, not by punishing yourself, but by remembering that tomorrow needs you. And if tomorrow needs you, you owe it a plate like this." There was a quiet murmur, then soft applause, and the sound of a few people nodding, whispering recipes and ideas to each other. Maggie, standing near the kitchen doors, didn't step forward. She simply folded her arms, her eyes bright, as if satisfied that her card had found a larger home. Emily reached up, her hand resting gently on her father's shoulder. "You did more than survive, Dad," she whispered. "You gave us something to hold on to." The potluck continued in laughter and chatter, but for Tom, the noise felt different. Less a crowd, more a chorus he now belonged to again. That evening, the house settled under a thin blanket of snow. The porch light glowed softly, throwing its halo across the familiar swing. Inside, Tom hung the green card on the small hook where he kept his keys, as though it were both a map and a talisman. Emily poured 2 mugs of coffee, steam rising in slow curls, filling the kitchen with a quiet warmth. They carried the mugs to the porch, sitting side by side. The swing rocked gently, the cold air brushing their cheeks, the light above them steady. For the first time in months, Tom's smile came without effort. He wrapped both hands around the mug, watching the steam lift into the night. No thunder, no fanfare, just a deep, enduring calm. A knock rattled the doorframe. Tom looked up to see his neighbor, Mr. Reynolds, cap in hand. "Evening, Tom. Think you could write that plate down for my Ruth? She's been struggling and, well, I reckon what worked for you might help her too." Tom exchanged a glance with Emily, then back at the neighbor, his grin widening. He rose from the swing, the porch light bathing him in steady glow. Yeah, he said softly. I think I can do that. The church bell rang once more in the distance, and the porch light held steady, as if to bless the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Tom, but for anyone ready to start again with one right plate. The porch light glowed steady against the first snow, and the green index card now hung beside Tom's keys, no longer a warning, but a guide worn smooth by use. He breathed easier, shoulders no longer bowed by dread, as if the weight of those red digits on the clinic scale had finally lifted. Some journeys don't close with applause. They close with the quiet proof of a meal shared, a porch swing that doesn't creak from despair, and a daughter's hand resting steady. Even late in life, kindness and discipline can redraw the map. If this story stirred a memory, share it below. And if you'd like more moments like this, feel free to subscribe and stay a while.